Welcome to Get Out Go. I'm Christoph, and today we'll be looking at cooling options for your food and drinks while you're overlanding. Specifically, I'll be comparing refrigerators and cooler boxes, look at the pros and cons of each, and then do a quick test to see how they perform over a couple of days. Let's start with the cooler box. Regardless of your experience as an overlander or camper, chances are good you have a cooler box in your house already. There's quite a wide range of coolers in form, performance and price. For our purposes, we'll be looking at these entry-level ones. The first pro of the cooler box is price. Compared to the refrigerator, these are cheap. You can pick one of these up for 250 rands, that's 17 US dollars. There are more efficient coolers on the market, like the rotary molded ones. These price from 1,500 to 3,000 rands, it's $200. It's still cheaper than a fridge though. The next pro is simplicity. Cooler boxes don't have any electronics, no moving parts, and more importantly, don't need any electricity. They're quite mobile and sturdy. Fair enough, they get a little heavy when they're fully loaded, but you can still carry them around and they're not tethered to your vehicle. Con-wise, the cooler box obviously needs ice to work. This means if you're going away for more than a couple of days, you're going to need a constant supply of fresh ice to keep your perishables and drinks cool. This also means it isn't really an option when you're traveling to very remote areas for any extended periods of time. You could use dry ice, however it needs to be handled with care and needs specific breathable cooler boxes. Also, the ice takes up at least a third of the inside of the cooler. Then probably the worst con of all of them is if your food isn't properly sealed, it's gonna get soggy. Then, albeit not massive, the cost of ice will obviously add up over the long run as well. We'll also look at the difference of ice blocks and normal ice cubes to see if there's any difference performance-wise. Ice blocks or frozen water bottles have the advantage of not waterlogging your food, but does it work as well as ice? Let's see. Purely for interest's sake, let's also have a look at a distant cousin of the cooler box and the refrigerator, the 12-volt Thermoelectric Cooler. It's constructed similarly to a cooler box, and it has a thermoelectric cooler rather than a compressor like a fridge. Now this unit has a few problems. Firstly, you can't load it up with ice as it's got an internal fan that you have to keep dry and clear of obstruction. Second of all, it'll only keep a few degrees cooler than ambient temperature. And lastly, it runs constantly, so it uses a lot more power than a fridge. So this really isn't an option other than for short day trips with low ambient temperatures. When asked, most overlanders will tell you their fridge or freezer is an indispensable piece of gear. Let's have a look at some of the pros and cons and whether you really need one. You can set your fridge to a desired temperature. Most units can actually be set to be freezers as well, and you get fridge freezer dual compartment ones as well. Most units will work on AC or DC power. Fridges also have much lower amp hour draw than thermoelectric coolers, as the compressor only runs until the desired temperature is achieved and then switches off until it's needed again. And then the big one, of course, you don't need any ice. This frees up the inside, doesn't make food soggy, and you can go to remote locations without having to worry about fresh ice. On the downside, fridges are expensive. They range anything from 5,000 to 15,000 rands, that's $1,000. You also need electricity. This means additional cost to your vehicle, for instance, for dual battery systems, etc. And lastly, they're not as mobile. Yes, you can carry them around, but they need to stay tethered to power. Now let's have a look how the cooler boxes performed against the fridge in my little test. I pre-cooled all of them before adding the drinks, and the drinks were cold already. I added ice to the one cooler box, ice blocks to the other, and set the fridge to 5 degrees. The ice blocks posed an interesting problem because they're quite bulky. It actually made it very difficult to fit the drinks. I opened all of them up 3 times a day to try and simulate real use, and they were stored in my garage with an average ambient temperature of about 23 degrees Celsius. At the beginning of the test, the cooler with ice read 5 degrees Celsius, the cooler with ice blocks 3 degrees Celsius, and the fridge 5 degrees Celsius. At the end of the first day, the temperatures were 9 in the cooler box with ice, 10 in the cooler box with ice blocks, and 5 in the fridge. End of day 2, the ice as well as the ice blocks were almost completely melted, and the temperatures were 10 for the ice, 12 for the ice blocks, and no surprise, 5 for the fridge. So what's the final verdict? I'd say a cooler box is perfectly fine for short trips and or where you have access to ice. Most importantly though is to have a good cooler box, definitely not like the ones we tested here today. When you're going to remote areas or extended trips, the freezer is tops. If you can afford it along with the power upgrades needed, it's a great investment. What some folks do as well is use a combination of a freezer and cooler box, moving items across from the freezer to the cooler box as and when they need it, and so doing keeping the cooler box cool as well. If you're just starting out, remember there are some campsites that have communal fridge freezers as well that you could also use. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them below. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Until next time, get out there.